I believe all of the commissioners are on board. So we do in fact have a quorum. And I am going to call this meeting to order. It's a joint meeting of the Norwich Public Utilities Board of Commissioners and the Sewer Authority. And it's the meeting for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Just as a preface, in order to effectively run the meeting, we ask that people state their name and title before speaking so that we know who's out there. And the first item on the agenda is 15 minutes of public comment. I'd like to make a couple of quick comments. I mean, first of all, we invite all public commentary, but it's important, I think, for people to understand that it's not a debate, it's not a question and answer session. It's an opportunity for the public to advance their ideas, and we will subsequently consider those ideas as a board and a staff, and move on them if they make sense, and then not if they don't. And secondly, I would ask not only that members of the public list their names and their addresses, but also I would say that if they're having trouble for any reason logging in order to make their comments, I think we can interrupt the agenda to accommodate them later on in the meeting.
Is this for public comment?
Excuse me?
Did you ask for public comment?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I have a public comment. Is everyone present and ready for public comment?
Absolutely.
Okay. My name is Paula Lisitra. I manage and own 68 units in Norwich Woods. And I've had a really big problem with Norwich Public Utilities for years now, where I just spent over $10,000 in legal bills, in which I'm seeking reimbursement for. So in the crux of it, I have water bills, I have a condo association, so I have common area lighting bills, I have empty unit bills, I have some units where I pay the water, some units where the tenants pay their water, and Norwich Public Utilities has always given me a hard time where they needed the signed lease, they needed umbrella coverage to put it in my name when the tenant goes out. But more importantly, I would get 50 emails saying my bill is ready, 50 more emails saying auto pay is ready to come out, 50 more emails saying thank you for your payment. None of those bills had any identifying factors. They were just gibberish numbers, like 16 unit numbers. So oftentimes I'd get a bill for $3,000 and I don't know what this bill is for, and it's automatically getting paid. So in the beginning, they had the building numbers wrong. So if I got a $3,000 bill, I would call and say, why is it so high? And they say, you must have a running toilet in building 7. I would call all 18 tenants. I'd get the licensed plumber at $100 an hour. I would go down. We would check 3 toilets in each apartment. Lo and behold, that's not building 7. They tell me that's building 4. And I'm like, well, which one is building 7? So it took me like a good year with the tax assessor to say, let's go in chronological order. Building 1 would be apartment 1. Building 2 would be the next sequence of numbers. Building 3 would be the next sequence of numbers. That made sense to my brain. So finally, we got that squared away, and I asked for compensation of my time, my plumber's time, and all that chaos, and no one offered anything. So I asked for a Zoom meeting, and we had a Zoom meeting with Jeff and Ruth and Chris Riley and myself, and we squared away that, and Ruth was supposed to get a list of if we could have like an identifier on the bill that says, this is for the parking lot lights, this bill is for the water in building 1, this is unit 34's electric. So I had an idea, because it was chaos, because some of the bills were auto pay, some of them were not auto pay. It was really, really chaotic. And I realized Chris confided in me or whatever, said that they had some internal issues, but it has cascaded to the point where I have lost my temper, which I don't often do, but I lost my temper. You could hear the video calls several times because I'm a businesswoman, and when things don't make sense to me, they need to be rectified. And I went through the proper channels, I thought, with Ruth and Chris and everyone else to ask for a meeting, a modification, a solution, something. But what they did was they went to an attorney and they started putting all of my units in foreclosure because I didn't pay the water bill. But I had a really nice conversation with Kristen, who I hear is out now, sick, and I paid like $6,000 of previous tenants that moved out. Now, I had given those tenants their security deposits back because I had no idea they had water balances, because all I had was a bill with 10058973259. It's like I have no control over what's happening, but I'm being mandated to pay all of these bills. So now it just cost me $16,000 in water, electric, and 10 of it were legal fees. Meanwhile, most of my tenants were calling NPU saying, please, I would like to pay my water. But the kicker is that NPU wouldn't send my tenants their water bill. They would send me their water bill. So me, like a moron, I go and I tape it on the door like this is a breach of confidentiality. And I would go on a Saturday morning taping the bills to the door. And I'm like, this is so stupid. So I called NPU and they said, well, the tenant is supposed to know. They go to pay their electric and their gas, they have to call for the water bill, which makes no sense to me. Why wouldn't they pursue the tenant directly? They have a relationship. They took a security deposit and everything for their water, just like they did for electric and gas. And I have the same scenario in Torrington where tenants pay their own water, gas, and electric. I have not heard from Torrington Water Company since 2008. They go to collections with the tenant. They have a relationship with the tenant. They get the security deposit from the tenant. And I just pay when the unit is empty in between tenants. So it's baffling to me why I would get not only all those emails, but then I would get the paper bills. Then I would get the delinquent notices, the red pieces of paper. I didn't know what to do with all of this stuff because I would get hard copies, I'd get emails, I'd get automatic payments. Really, 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 really frustrating. And all I ever asked since 2018 was to have one representative, one email with like a spreadsheet, an Excel. Make me a spreadsheet that says unit 34, $89 water, just what I'm responsible for. So that I could say, hey, tenant in 34, you've got a balance with NPU, and I could keep on top of them. But it really, really, I need help because Norwich Public Utilities has really done me wrong since 2018, and it's cost me over $15,000. Has anybody else had a scenario similar to this? I know I'm a large client because I've got my 68 units plus the parking lot water. There's a pump station, there's parking lot lights.
This is Bill Wasika. I'm a commissioner.
Hi.
Hi. Well, you mentioned earlier, you said you asked for modifications. What do you mean by modifications?
In the bill, in the actual bill, like picture yourself in your inbox on a random morning, you get 54 emails saying with 19 numbers in each bill that has this account number and this amount, and you have no idea what that account is. So you're blindly, I don't know if that's an automatic payment one, if that's a delinquent tenant one, if that's for the parking lot lights, if that's for the sewer water station. I don't know if it's for water. I don't know if it's for electric. I would just get this gibberish in emails.
And this has been going on since 2018.
2018, I bought this building, and I honestly have been trying to get resolution. If you go through the notes, and then Chris Riley apologized, and he said they're having some internal staffing issues and be patient. But then like a year would pass, and I'm like, you got to get your stuff together. And now we finally, I thought, had a representative that could be my liaison, Kristen Wimberly, but I heard that she's out indefinitely or something.
Did you pay the bills during that time frame?
Absolutely. The bills that I knew about, some of the bills I didn't even know were my bills, because after a while I literally would get a stack. I wish I had them this thick mailed to me. And then I would get this I don't know if it's the same or different bills, emailed to me 3 times. One telling me my bill was about to come out. The second one telling me my automatic payment was coming out the next day. And the third one saying thank you. So I'm thinking all of my bills I put on automatic payment because I'm too busy to think about it. So these stack of bills, I'm thinking, were my tenants' bills. But like, why am I getting involved in my tenants' bills? So I think it was really, really intentional. And my attorney honestly thought it was intentional as well, because the amount of stacks of payments, and next time I'm going to collect them and mail them to you if you don't mind, so you can see the ludicrous amount of postage, paper. But there's no organization in terms of communicating to me what is owed. In the beginning, it was the mislabeled buildings, and I had $3,000 water bills. I didn't know I had $3,000 water bills. It's on automatic payment. And that's fine if I had a running toilet, but to have me run around like an idiot to building 4 when what NPU had labeled building 4 was not what the tax assessor had at building 4, nor did I know was building 4. And then you call back and you get a different representative and they're like, oh no, meter blah, blah, blah is building 2, not building 4. And I'm like, what? It made no
I guess
sense.
another question I have is a lot of the 68 units you own, it doesn't seem to be consistent all the way around how you get billed. I mean, who's responsible for the bills? Is it you or is it your tenants?
Well, so it's a fractioned condo. So there are 68 units, which I own 62. But the way it was figured out, there are 7 buildings total, pardon me, 6 building total. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of the buildings, I pay the water, and the others have individual water meters. So the condo owner or my tenant, depending on the unit, it's very confusing, but they have individual water meters.
And did you purchase them like that with that arrangement, or why is it all different?
That's how they were built. That's how I purchased them. And I'm comfortable. Anything that is mine, building 1, 2, and 3, I pay the water. They're on automatic payment.
And those have all been paid.
Those are all been paid. But you have random condo. I bought some condos as well, and the 20 lower units are all individual water meters in the basement. So there are random tenants there where I've given them back their security deposit because I'm clueless that they owe NPU $700 in water. So
Is the water bill included in their monthly rent?
no, it is not, and nor do I want it to be. If they have a water meter and they have a gas meter and they have an electric meter, then I would like them to pay their own utilities. And that's how it's worded in the
Well, as I said early on in this process, public comment exists for the public to make comments and express their opinion, and we will subsequently take a look at the issues. So, yeah, I think that we've heard what you have to say, and I think we do need to move on to other subjects.
Well, it's 6:12 and I logged on at 6:02. How will I follow up or hear from someone? Do you have clarity? Can you surmise what my issues are so I can hang up knowing that you understand my issues?
No, I'm not going to have a debate with you. I heard your comments. We'll talk to the administration.
No, I wasn't debating. I'm trying to understand if you understand my issues.
No, you asked me if I understood your issues. Yes, I understand your issues. We will talk to the administration and we'll go from there. Well, we're not prepared to resolve it now.
Oh, no, my expectation definitely was not to have you resolve it now. Okay, this is exactly what I was getting from MPU. Okay. Okay, so I feel like I've done something wrong here, and all I was trying to do was communicate to the ethics committee that I feel like I, as a customer, have not been treated fairly in the last few years.
No, no one said you did anything wrong. This is a period of public comment. You've exceeded the time normally given to people to make public comments. We said at the beginning of the session that we would listen to the public comments and then we would subsequently follow up with staff. I don't know what else you want.
Okay, so who would be following up with me, do you think?
Chris LaRose.
Oh, I've been trying to get a hold of Chris LaRose, his email goes to someone else on the website. May I have Chris's contact information?
I don't have it in front of me, Chris.
It's chrislarose@npumail.com.
Chris LaRose at NPU.
Mail.com.
Have you gotten mail from me before? Paula Licitra, does that sound familiar?
I have not received any mail that I know of.
Yeah, when you click on the website, I think it goes to your predecessor, whoever was before you. So check that. Yeah. All right, Chris, call me. I look forward to hearing back from you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else who wants to do public comment? Once again, is there anyone else in the public who wishes to comment at the meeting?
Hi, my name is Evan Courtney from 247 Harland Road in Norwich.
Okay.
So 2 months ago, I spoke to the board about revisiting the ideas about public broadband and digital infrastructure. And I just wanted to mention that in the 2 months since then, as a community, the issue is getting larger. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a bill in the Energy and Technology Committee subcommittee at the moment, advanced by the governor, Bill 6442, Act Concerning Equitable Access to Broadband. And it's the governor's initiative to expand broadband internet access in communities throughout Connecticut. Which is sort of brings back to the points that I was making in my last comment. And additionally, under great political pressure, mostly from the Attorney General's office, Comcast has decided to roll back their data caps on high-speed internet to 2022. But this digital infrastructure is going to be a thing that keeps coming around, and I just wanted to keep in the board's ear about it. It is my wish that at some point in the future, the board might establish a subcommittee to look further into this. I realize that there was a study done last year. I've been in contact with Chris Riley. Thank you, Chris. He's going to get me a copy of that and see what questions were asked and how you guys came to basically what internet options you were looking at that were so expensive to scare you off of them. But thank you very much, Chris. And thank you very much to the board for hearing me, and I'll be in contact over the months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to make any comments? Once again, any other members of the public who would like to make some comments? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes for the meeting of February 23rd, 2021. And I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion, Bob.
So moved,
Bill
Mr. Chairman.
Wozika.
Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2021.
Thank you, Bill.
Second, Steve Becker.
Thank you, Steve. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is board reorganization. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Bill Wozika on being reappointed. Actually, I probably should congratulate the city council on making such a good decision. Bill has been a terrific member. I think this has been a very good group. I think we are technically diverse, but we know our way. We have different skills, but I think we work together. And I think we did work in a non-political way. And I think that's what the taxpayers and the ratepayers deserve. And I think Bill is a big part of that. But having said that, when a new commissioner is named, we have reappointments of all of the assignments within the organization, from chairman to various organizations and so forth. And so we can do these either one at a time, or we can just make a blanket reappointment as things stand or minor modifications. Do we have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Becker, I'd like to make a recommendation to the board, if I might, with your permission.
Sure.
I would like to suggest that the following individuals serve in the capacities that I indicate for the next board moving forward. I would suggest that you, Mr. Chairman, remain as the present chairman and continue for another year. Commissioner Teal, who has acted very well in our behalf, would continue as vice chairman. And Michael Goldblatt would be appointed as the new secretary. And I propose that as a group to be voted upon by the committee if they so choose.
All right. Do we have any other nominations?
Well, you need a second to move that forward, Bob.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Do we have a second to move that forward?
I'll second
I'll
that.
sec-
Bill Wazeeka.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
No abstentions? That passes unanimously. I should point out, and I don't know if this applies to any other offices, but I know our bylaws limit the chairman to three years. So this will be my final year as chairman. It's been a pleasure being in this role. In another year, it'll be a pleasure not being in it, I think, quite frankly. It's been a lot of work, but I think we've done well. The other thing that we have to talk about are appointments for the various other committees and organizations where we have representatives, including our subcommittees, the NPU Economic Development Committee, Subcommittee, the NCDC Board, CMAC, those things. And also, I guess, I don't see it on my agenda, but also the Finance and Accounting Committee. We could
That's the
nominate.
second one, Bob. It's on there.
It's on
Oh,
there.
is it? Oh, I'm
Finance and
sorry.
Audit Subcommittee is there.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I would entertain a motion if people want to do it to just keep everyone in place, or if we want to make changes, feel free to discuss it.
This is Commissioner Becker again. It's my opinion that the board works very flowingly, very smoothly with the group that's put together in the certain committees that they are. It would be my suggestion and my recommendation that we continue with the principals that act in these committees now.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Stu Peel.
Stu, thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It passes unanimously. The next item is information and updates provided to the board prior to tonight's meeting. Are there any questions for Chris or any members of the staff on materials that were provided in the board packets on Friday?
Bob, this is Bill Wazeeka. I just have one quick question. For the development off of Dunham Street that's being built right now, Chris, or maybe Jeff?
Yeah, Westwood, yeah.
Yeah. So are those going to be apartments where the utilities that we provide to the people that are going to reside there, how will they be billed? Will it be billed to the tenant or will it be billed to the owner of the place? Do you know yet?
The electric and gas are being billed to the tenants, and the water and sewer to the owner.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Which
Thank
is
you,
our
Chris.
standard policy.
Okay. That's our policy then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can you touch on why that is our policy? What's the distinction?
Jeff, you want to go into the detail of that, please?
Absolutely. So as a utility, you have two choices as to how you are to assess or to have water and sewer paid for. And the way MPU does it is the responsibility of the landlord. It's our legal right to do it that way. And it allows us to hold the property owner responsible for bills that often, unfortunately, go unpaid. And it gives us the ability to foreclose and follow up in that respect. To be very straightforward, the law does allow to bill the tenants directly. However, in that case, the only recourse that you have is the tenant themselves. And as we find on the electric and gas side, quite frequently tenants run up a bill and then move to another community, and we have virtually no ability to go after past due balances for that. So this is the way that MPU has always done it. We've explored this and investigated this with our legal counsel just to see if there were any efficiencies to be gained. We also reached out to the other municipal utilities in Connecticut that have water and or sewer, and everyone else does it the same way that we do for the same reason. So that's the 100,000 foot. We can always drill into it more if you'd like to, but that's the basis behind the policy and the reason that, again, we and the other municipal water utilities do it this way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
I think another important thing is if we shut off electric and gas, the tenant is not going to be forced to vacate. If there's no water and sewer, per Uncas Health, the apartment becomes condemned. So
this is Mike. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, hi. This is Mike. I guess that when this woman, Mrs. Lasicha or Pauline Lasicha, I think, she bought this unit. This system was in place, so maybe she wasn't fully apprised of how it worked. I don't know, but it was, a pre-existing condition when she bought the building.
Mike, we can't talk about specific customers in a public meeting, but happy to go into detail in executive session.
Okay, we won't go into that.
If you want to talk about policy or generalities, this is the place. When we talk about specifics of a unit, tenant, customer, that has to go in executive session.
Well, the point I was trying to get to is I think that if you have a multi-unit place, the billing has to be clear which unit is in arrears, so that the landlord can react appropriately, and should have an agreement with the tenant that they can take it out of the security deposit if they don't pay it. But also, our billing needs to be clear enough so that the landlord knows who's behind. That seems to be an issue. Okay, I'm not talking about anybody specific now, but maybe that's maybe our procedures for large multi-unit places need to be reviewed so that the information is more readily available and understandable. That's all I had to say.
Right. And one thing, I just want to make clear that the landlord is never billed for a service that they haven't personally signed in for. So, whether over time, if you're managing many, many units, maybe it becomes confusing. I certainly understand that, but I want to make it very clear that we're not billing anyone for a service that they didn't sign in for, if that makes sense.
Jeff, this is Stu
They
Peel.
haven't.
So
They
the
haven't. I'm
so the
sorry.
liens
Go
against
ahead.
the liens against the property are just for water, correct?
Water and sewer.
Okay, well, yeah, water and sewer, but not electric or gas.
Correct.
So if a tenant didn't pay their gas or electric bill, you can't put a lien against the property. That's a matter of you chasing down the tenant.
Yeah.
But
We can shut the service off.
right, but that's your recourse is shutting it off.
Mhm.
But you can't shut off water because then the place is unlivable.
Correct.
So the recourse then is to put a lien against the property, and it's preferential then. Cindy and I had apartments for 25 years, and we always paid the water. The tenant paid the electric and then we paid the water, and that's just, we didn't have 68 units, we only had 4, but nonetheless, that's how we did it, and then we never had a problem with it.
Appreciate that.
All right, fine. Are there any other questions on this item?
Nope, thank you.
All right, and hearing none, the next item on the agenda is the CMEC update. Stuart?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, for the February 25th meeting, the regional competitive numbers were up for January with a total member return of $80 per megawatt hour versus the budgeted $83 per megawatt hour. Project portfolio was up 13%, and the total asset portfolio was up 5% at $1.28 million. David Meisinger, the CEO, and Kevin Barber, the chair of the board, testified on March 4th at the Joint Committee on Energy and Technology of the Connecticut Legislature concerning Bill SB 952. Issues raised by CMEC about portions of SB 952 concerning implied costs that MEUs may incur that were intended for IOUs or investor-owned utilities. Specifically, costs associated with the PPA for nuclear power that CMEC does not purchase, and a systems benefit charge that pays for programs utilized by IOUs but not by CMEC. The posture of CMEC is to support the state's green energy initiatives while not subsidizing the IOUs for services that CMEC ratepayers do not use. The board met in executive session to discuss events associated with the board approval of the sub-base fuel cell project and the project's current financial status. A second executive session was held on March 3rd to answer additional questions of the board. The details are confidential. However, the overall reception of the sessions was good, and the board now has a much better understanding of the project's inception and the evolution from a net positive project at board approval to a net negative project today. Also, at the March 25th board meeting coming up, the audit committee will recommend for board approval the 2020 draft financial statement, which received an unmodified opinion from Clifton Larson Allen, LLC, formerly Bloom Shapiro. Robert or Chris, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job covering it, Stuart.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any questions for Stuart? And hearing none, we will move on to the Financial and Audit Subcommittee report. Michael, do you have anything to report?
Oh, yes, thank you. We had 2 meetings. On February 22nd, presentations were given for budget drivers in the following areas. Gas operations was presented by Barry Ellison. Electric operations was presented by Eric McDermott. And generally administrative was presented by Laura Huron. In addition, Steve Cinco provided an update on the process for potentially securing a line of credit. An overall debt management policy is being developed as recommended by the city controller and our financial consultant. NPU staff will use the city's debt management policy as a baseline as this project moves forward. And I know, Bob, you were enthusiastic about going down this road and figuring out something. I think it's a good idea too. You know, it's a nice convenience where if we have, you know, marginal cash balances to keep our ratings up, we can borrow money on this without affecting our cash balances or our credit worthiness for certain things. So I think it's going in the right direction. It's a good thing.
Good.
At the March 8th
agree.
meeting, oh, good. At the March 8th meeting, detailed presentations were given for budget drivers in the following areas. Water operations, presented by Larry Sullivan. and sewer operations as well, presented by Larry Sullivan, and human resources presented by Laura Huron. In addition, Steve Cinco provided an overview of the sewer assessment process and collections issues. This will be discussed in tonight's meeting. I think Mike Driscoll and Joe Zareko from Merthyr Cullinan will be here to expand on this. I was a little surprised that after 20 years, if somebody has a sewer assessment, that the assessment, I guess, evaporates or is no longer enforceable. So, you know, and I understand that legally we have the right to start assessing high rates of interest in accordance with state, which I believe are as high as 18% a year, and also to force a foreclosure. You know, I think it's a very difficult situation because some people never wanted the sewer, you know, to go by their driveway, and they never intended to hook up and haven't hooked up. But they've got this assessment here, and I think there's a modest rate of interest accruing, which is okay. I don't think we should charge 18% for anything. I don't think anybody in the state should charge 18% for everything. We're supposed to be a state that's considerate of people, and that, to me, that's not very nice. So I'm just firing that shot right now before the presentation. And also, I'm wondering, and this is something that maybe the lawyers could address that are handling this, you know, instead of just foreclosing on somebody's property because, you know, because they had a sewer line put in the road that they didn't even vote for or want or use, I'm wondering if there would be an option to, not only keep the interest rate low, but to give them an option to voluntarily extend the lien so that foreclosure does not have to happen. I think, you know, in the context of today's world with COVID-19 and all the suffering that's going on, I think the last thing we want to do is be foreclosing on somebody or charging them 18% interest. I mean, it would just give us, you know, not a good look in the public eye, in my opinion. And there's got to be a better way to do it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. And I think that's my view on that. Also, Laura will be presenting a summary of the overall NPU budget later on at the meeting. And that's my report, if anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you, Mike. Hearing no questions, the next thing is financial reports, and that will be Laura and the budget, I believe.
Yeah, so Laura's going to do an overview of the 6 presentations that were provided in the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, where we went into much more detail. But we have staff here present for anyone who has to, who would like to get more detail than what Laura may provide. So, Laura, why don't you lead away and be open for any questions as you go along.
Okay. So, as mentioned in the Finance and Audit Committee meetings, we had detailed presentations. So this is our summary overview of the proposed fiscal 22 budget. Next slide, please. The proposed budget includes expenses that reflect operational costs necessary for meeting the following priorities: the board support of economic development, proactive investment in our infrastructure across all 4 services, our state regulatory requirements, exceeding our customer expectations for service, and deploying technology for the benefit of NPU and the city. The budget does reflect normal operating conditions. NPU will manage fiscal year 22 spending as appropriate to match potentially reduced revenues based on the continuing impact of the pandemic. Next slide, please. NPU has approved modest increases in rates that cover 3 years without compromising safety, reliability, or great customer service. For the fiscal 22 budget, revenues included the rate change effective November 1st, 2021, with those rates based on our detailed cost of service study. Next slide, please. So for fiscal 22, sales revenues are budgeted at 96.9 million. Other revenues are budgeted at 3.4 million, with total revenues coming in just over 100 million. Operating expenses are budgeted at 96 million. So for a net income of 4.2 million. After the net impact of capital, we're looking at a net change of 2.8 million, which is just a slight decrease from the fiscal 21 net change. And all of this is based on normalized sales and expenses projected for normal operations. And again, we're going to continue to monitor sales, operational activities, and customer payments, and make any modifications as necessary as we go through fiscal 22. Next slide, please. So going into our expenses, starting with wholesale energy, for fiscal year 22, the budgeted cost of purchased gas is 6.9 million, which has increased over fiscal 21, mostly due to the reduction in our AMA credit, which is based on the assets, the value of our assets that's been impacted by pipeline constraints and market uncertainty. Purchase power expenses is budgeted lower in fiscal 21, mostly due to lower costs as a result of the loss of a major customer and load decreases. Additionally, we've budgeted the use of rate stabilization funds to continue to minimize the impact of the wholesale cost volatility on our customers. Next slide, please. For fiscal year 22, NPU's contribution to the city general fund is based on our fiscal year 20 gross revenues, and that contribution is $8.6 million, which is a reduction of $520,000 from the previous year, which is due to the impact of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Operational payroll is budgeted at 16.3 million for fiscal year 22. The budgeted employee count for fiscal year 22 is 150. We have 2 new positions in the budget, a SCADA engineer and a meter technician. Next slide, please. Employee benefits are budgeted at 9.3 million. Health insurance is budgeted to increase about 367,000. Some of this is due to the uncertainty of the impact of the pandemic. Pension and OPEB are budgeted to increase. Pension 308,000 over fiscal year 21, and OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits, is anticipated to increase 65,000 from fiscal year 21. Both of these contributions are based on the ADEC, which is the actuarial determined employer contribution. Next slide, please. Taxes are budgeted at 3.3 million for fiscal year 22. This expense includes our gross receipts, our gross revenues tax of 3.15 million. In order to leverage the benefit of that gross revenues tax payment, NPU participates in programs including the Neighborhood Assistance Act, which works to keep those tax dollars local and support local community organizations. This has been historically about $150,000 annually. And we also pay property taxes for facilities located in other towns. Next slide, please. Business insurance is budgeted at just over $2 million for fiscal year 22, and this includes projected increases. Also, it includes new coverage that we're working on for this fiscal year, cyber insurance and pollution insurance. Next slide, please. Operations and maintenance expenses are budgeted at 7.55 million, which is relatively flat compared to fiscal year 21. Budget expenses for costs related to safety, reliability, regulatory-driven expenses across all 4 services, and detailed presentations of all of these were given at the Finance and Audit Committee. Next slide, please. Customer service and metering is budgeted at 944,000 for fiscal year 22. This includes the largest drivers of these areas is the payment processing fees, additional outside services, and the collections fees and legal services. Next slide, please. General and administrative expenses are budgeted at 3.5 million for fiscal year 22. This includes a variety of administrative process activities that support our operations, including technology, support legal services, employee training, safety, and utilities. The increased need for technologies is one of the biggest drivers for administrative expenses. Next slide, please. including in the general and administrative expenses, are the board expenses, which are budgeted at $655,000 for fiscal year 22, which includes the economic development support for NCDC, investments needing board approval, along with the other administrative support for the board and training. Next slide, please. Other operating expenses include our energy efficiency programs, which is based on projected revenues, the depreciation, which is based on our capital investment, and bad debt expenses based on our projected revenues. Next slide, please. Capital investment for fiscal year 22 is budgeted at a little over $10 million, which includes a wide variety of infrastructure improvements, mains and services across all 4 utilities, plant improvements at both the water and wastewater treatment facilities, investment in shared facilities and equipment, and improvements in each of the individual components of the divisions. Next slide, please. And now we're at our budget schedule. So we've done our detailed presentations to the Finance and Audit Committee and our overview of the fiscal 22 budget. The budget will be presented to the City Council on April 12th, and we will look for a vote on the budget at the April 27th meeting. And then the budget will be subsequently included in the city budget with the anticipation of the city council approval at the June 7th City Council meeting. Do we have questions on the budget?
I have 2 questions. One, I'm very sorry if I missed this, but what is the pilot contribution to the city this year, and how does it compare to the last year or 2?
Here, the contribution to the city is,
Okay.
let's see, it's $520,000 less than the prior year. So fiscal year 21, it's budgeted at just under 9.2 million. For fiscal year 22, 8.6. Based on our fiscal 20 revenues, this is the contribution to the city. So if we look at the trend below in the 10-year history, we can see that there are some ebbs and flows, a continuing upward trend where the contributions continue to grow to the city. It's 83.74 million over the last 10 years.
All right. I just wanted to get a perspective on what it had been, and I'm sorry if I missed it.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is a small thing, but I pushed for this a couple of years ago. If we're not going to use board effect, I think it's $5,000 a year, we probably ought to drop it.
I believe that's an annual subscription, and we can look at that as when that comes up. I'll be sure to make sure that expense gets reviewed once we see that invoice coming in.
Yeah. So Bob, when it comes to the general fund, the 2 drivers on that are commodity costs and the collections, right?
Yes.
What you're selling. And obviously with the coronavirus pandemic, we have seen some impacts on sales this year. So this is going to be, when we present to the city council, this is going to be highly emphasized on what causes this and why it's going to be a little less going forward. Hopefully, with the recovery, it'll come back up again for next year.
No, that's understandable. In fact, quite frankly, I'm happy that it is where it is. I thought it might be more severe.
At the beginning of the pandemic, it was projecting to be more significant, and we did communicate with City Council when we presented last year's budget that we had concerns, and it's a little better than we presented back in April of last year.
Good.
This is Stu Peel. I had one question to Laura. Under board expenses, there was something that caught my eye. It was investments that require board approval. Is that investments needing board approval? And I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, so that's the additional monies we're using for due diligence on the Business Park North.
Okay.
And any other expenses towards economic development.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But just correct me if I'm wrong, but that amount is currently allocated in the budget, included in the budget, but it's not at this point allocated to anything.
Correct. So that's what, if there's a reason to provide additional due diligence funding, it would have to be voted on and approved by the board. Or if we entered into a, NCDC entered into a purchase sales agreement on that project, there would be money coming out of this section here.
So, I mean, this does not mean we should be casual about it, but if we do need to do that, we can do it up to $467,000 without impacting the budget.
That's correct.
Or going back to the board.
No, we'd have to make the actual allocation, I think. Wouldn't we,
Yes.
Chris? Yeah.
Yes, we would. Yep.
Within the budget. Within the budget.
Within or without, I mean.
This is not what we'd consider traditional funding of projects, so we would have to go with get a board vote for this.
Mhm. Are there any other questions in regards to the budget or anything else that we can review that would help make a decision when we're going towards a vote?
One other thing that maybe you can clarify for me, because I got involved in this, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I found it odd then, and I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. We present this budget to the city council, and does the city council has to approve it? Is that correct, or what is their involvement?
Because the department of the city, we present our budget to the city council. The board is responsible for our budget. I believe the only authority the city council has is to make recommendations in regards to expenses. Is that correct, Chris?
They cannot change any line items or budget. They can approve or basically say yay or nay to the number, but our budget number is driven by our revenue. So there's really nothing, we can't lower our budget because it matches our revenue. So there's really not, they have to approve it, but there's really not much they can modify. There's really nothing they can modify.
Okay.
And the rates are all approved by the board and were done so already back in the fall of 2020.
All right, that sounds fine. Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions?
I just had one problem on the capital project side.
Sure.
If you go on the side. So we're anticipating not reducing it by 5 million.
Yes.
For
So the big change between last year and this year is we are coming to the tail end of the large investment in the water projects.
Water project. Okay. Yep.
WRF funding. So we're just about finished with all of those large funded capital projects.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay, thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
And Bill, the large expense on the sewer plant is not going to happen until next budget year. Right now, we're completing the design, going out for bid. It'll take a while to get the bid in and the invoices coming.
Right.
The big expenditure in sewer will be in the summer of 22.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Chris.
All right, so if there are no other questions, and if we don't want to necessarily hear from anyone else, it's probably the appropriate time for us to vote to adopt the budget or to not adopt it, I suppose. Is there a motion to adopt the budget?
Oh, Bob, before you make that motion, we
Yes.
can adopt the budget now, or if there's additional questions, we could wait a month and adopt it next meeting.
Oh, okay.
This meeting is a little different than we've done in the past because there's no rate implications. So it's up to the board whether to go or not. If there's more information needed, we can definitely provide more information in the next month. But since rates are not impacted, there's no harm in doing it now either.
All right. Well, that leaves it up to my four.
Yeah, I don't know what the consensus of the board is. I don't have any additional questions, so I can raise a motion and we can wait for a second. So.
All right, we have a motion to adopt the existing budget as presented.
I'll second that. Bill Warzika.
Thank you, Bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, a point of order. When you were on item 5 of the agenda leadership team template, I think there were
Yes.
2 other items: retirement update and COVID-19 financials that you may have skipped over.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't realize I had done that, but.
I think you did. Usually I'm
they
not.
Were all sort of grouped together, and I guess I was assuming if we had questions, we would
Okay.
direct them to any of those items. But if people have questions about the retirement incentive or the COVID-19 financials, feel free to raise them now.
It may be included in everything that Laura said. I just wanted to make note of it. That's all.
No, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, the next item is strategic presentations. Chris?
All right, Steve is going to lead us in a presentation on the sewer assessment process, and our attorneys are also online if any questions come up as we go through the very detailed analysis of where we're going on processing these assessments. Steve? Steve, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, start over then. Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, Mike Driscoll is on the line, and also Joe Shareko from Merthyr Carolina, who we have been working with for well over 6 months now on sewer assessments. I think, Mike made some good points earlier. And I think one of the questions people you may have is, why now? Why are we looking at sewer assessments and collections and things like that? Well, the last sewer assessments that expired, these are 20-year assessments. I'm going to get into a little bit of detail on that. They expired in 2003 and 2013. So between now and 2033, there are 14 other assessment projects that are going to be expiring. We've had a lot of customers contact us, what their standing is with regard to unpaid balances. Properties have been transferred, or they've been left to family members and things like that. And also, the city's legally obligated to collect these unpaid balances under state statute. We serve as the sort of the collection agent for the city. But if you think of a sewer assessment in terms of taxes, it's very similar to taxes. And if you have any more questions on that, once I go through the presentation, Joe and Mike can definitely answer those questions. But Mike, you had some good points, and I want to address it, because at the end of the day, no one wants to foreclose on properties. That's not our plan here at all. Since we have never been through a sewer assessment process with you as a board, I thought I'd just run through that very quickly. Sewer is different than gas or water expansions, or, well, not water, but or electric expansions, in that we can't decide to go put sewer in a neighborhood and then go in and charge customers. The property owners have to express interest in sewer service. It's either due to a health concern, the Department of Health may even recommend that they talk with us, and then there's a process. It's based on public interest. The city council has to get involved and approve and recommend the project to the sewer authority. And then the sewer authority subsequently holds public hearings and votes on the project, and they provide an estimated assessment level for the project or total cost of the project. This is all governed under state statute. Subsequent to all of that process, only then is the project designed, it's constructed, and then based on the final cost of the project, we serve again as the billing agent for the city to bill and collect the sewer half assessments. That when we bill a customer, or when we bill a property owner, I want to say, because they're not necessarily a customer, and they submit their payment, that flows right through to the city. It doesn't go through our books. So, and again, this is all expansion, and the assessment process is all governed by Connecticut State Statute, Chapter 103, Section 7-249. if you want to refer to that. So it's a little different than what we are used to dealing with. Sewer has its own set of statutes. I just want to go over quickly where we are with sewer assessments. With active assessments right now, the last project that we have was completed in 2012, and it's a 2-year assessment. So that'll be that assessment process will be ended in 2033. The active assessments we currently have are all the neighborhoods that you see here, anywhere from East Great Plains, Harlan Road, Flyers Drive, Birdie Knoll, Train Cove. We have over 1,000 properties that were originally assessed in these projects. 321 currently have outstanding balances of about $1.6 million. Now, because we are a utility and not a tax collector, we were very customer friendly in that we allowed a variety of repayment plans. We allowed monthly repayment plans, quarterly repayment plans, annual repayment plans. And as property changed hands, that sometimes led to some difficulties in collections. And the assessments are required to be paid over the 20-year bond term. And if you look at the statutes, it actually says you're supposed to pay it annually, just like a tax. Past due properties right now, we have 175 properties past due of the 321. That's about 55%, a total past due amount of little $700,000. And you know, one key thing, 97% of the delinquent balance is past due more than 120 days, and 32 properties have never made a payment. As Mike alluded to earlier, some people didn't even want the sewer to go by their house. Well, that debate was settled back when the assessments were put on the properties and people signed their name to the bottom of the assessment. It's not debated now, many years later. So even though they never made a payment, they've never supported the project, they were still part of the original assessment and got assessed. And that assessment comes through the City of Norwich tax collector. Tax assessor, I should say, sorry. Some of the challenges we're currently having is, again, people are calling, asking about what's going on with their assessments. The original lien duration is coming due. Collections issues have emerged. We had, I think, 4 projects retire in 2020. Another 5 are retiring in 2021. We have a number of customers that still owe on those projects. We don't have the ability to shut off a sewer for non-payment of a connection fee. We originally put liens on the properties to guarantee the payment, and that was presumed to be the guarantee. But after 20 years, there's issues because the lien sort of it doesn't continue after a 20-year period. You have to actually go in. And Joe, we have Joe and Mike on the phone. We can talk more about that, and that's some of the options that we're considering what we can do after 20 years. But because of our customer-friendly billing approach, it really provided a lack of incentive for customers to pay timely. In addition, changes in property ownership did not always address liens or payment of outstanding assessments, especially when the property changed ownership through someone passing away. And then again, property owners who did not support the project refused to pay in a timely manner. So we have a number of situations like that. So we have a mix of people who totally pay their assessments, others who are paying them over time, others who have made payments but are not up to their payment terms, and some who have never made any payments. So what we've done is we worked with Joe Shareko at North Carolina. We've also worked with Mike to come up with a plan on how to move forward on this, because we have so many assessments over the next several years that are coming to completion. We need a really a roadmap in order to determine how we're going to go about recovering these assessments, because it's really the city's money, and legally we can't pay it out of sewer funds, and the city is required to collect it. So we're working together to come up with a plan in order to move forward on this. So that's what we've done so far. We've hired a Merthyr client. We've been working with them for well over 6 months. They've developed a legal document which tells us what we can and can't do with regard to sewer assessments. We've developed a roadmap to advance the proposed collection process, and it's in legal review right now. And part of that, the first thing we're going to have to do is go and perform title searches, confirm that when the assessor originally identifies that there's an assessment on the property, they file what's called a CGS 7253 assessment notice. We have to make sure that they're on file, continue to work with Mike and Joe to issue communications to any property owners that are delinquent. And then once we hear back from property owners, it's going to be, our response will depend really on their willingness to pay at that point. And our roadmap is going to go into details on how we're going to deal with that. So I just wanted to review this with everyone because you haven't experienced either the assessment process, unless you've been through an assessment process yourself with your own home. You maybe haven't dealt with either the original assessments or with assessments ending and what the repercussions of that are if people don't pay. So we thought this is a good time to let you know that we have been working on this, like I said, at least 6 months, almost up to a year internally, and sort of give you a status of where things are. But what we want to do really is, as we move forward, is bring back our roadmap, our plan to deal with this and give you a little bit more detail on the number of customers and different areas and things like that. So that's our
Stephen,
plan. I hear, Mike, your comments loud and clear, and we don't want to own properties. But if you have any questions, again, Mike and Joe are here. You can ask them any of the questions that you might have about legality of this or whether we have to do it or not. So that I'll just open up the floor for questions at this time.
Stephen, this is Stu Peel.
Hi,
Yeah, I
Stu.
was never. I'm just naive about the whole process because it never happened to me. But so if a bunch of people decide that they want it, they approach the city. They get a majority vote of the neighborhood or something like that. And I'm a homeowner and I don't want anything to do with the project, but I lose out and it all gets approved and they run a pipe down my street. Do I get the assessment whether I hook up or not?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And
So I can keep my right. So I can keep my system if I have I have a leaching field, I can keep that running, but I still have to pay the assessment. But I'm not, if I have a well, I'm not paying water or sewer, but all I'm paying is the assessment.
correct. And that happens in areas where, like the neighborhood, let's say the systems are going bad, and maybe there's some lots that are very small and they can't upgrade their system.
Yeah.
And there are some lots that can, so they upgrade. In the meantime, the sewer assessment process goes through and they decide to put sewer in the whole neighborhood.
Okay, so then I decide that I didn't like what happened to me and I'm not going to pay and I don't pay and I keep living there for 20 years and then I die or something and the house gets sold and you put a lien against the property so that when the house is sold, you'll get paid. Is that basically it?
Yeah, and Joe, you maybe can weigh in on some of the limitations of that or not.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Steve, for that great summary. And good evening, commissioners of the board, members of the public. My name is Joe Shreko, Merthyr Kalina. And so the thinking behind it really is a sewer benefit assessment is in effect improving the value of the property insofar as it's providing access to the sewer system, whether the property owner ultimately decides to go with well water or some other source or not and tie into the sewer. Because later on down the line, when ownership gets transferred, presumably that new owner will have an entirely new set of preferences. And the fact remains that the ability to tie into the sewer is there. And so it's in effect a permanent improvement on the property for which MPU ultimately needs to be paid.
So a quick question, Bill Warzika, and say a property, they don't pay their assessment for that 20-year period, and then they sell the property. Um, do they have to pay the full assessment at the time they purchase a property, or does a clock start ticking, over again, and they have another 20 years to pay it?
That's a
Bill,
great
Bill,
question. Oh, sorry if someone else was speaking there.
Yeah, this is Mike Driscoll.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, there's a buyer on that transaction. And the buyer is borrowing money from a bank, presumably, and the bank wants to be sure there's a clear title because sewer assessments and sewer liens are ahead of everything but taxes, so they're ahead of bank mortgages. So the seller has to provide a clear title or the sale doesn't take place. And I think at that point, you're not going to be able to have a negotiated or an extension of the time to pay it off because the buyer wants to get the title free and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now, and how about if they're not properly noticed under CGS 7-253? I mean, what happens in a case like that where they weren't properly notified?
So I'll jump in on that. And in my analysis, which, as Steve pointed out, is still under further review and subject to further revision, I did operate under the assumption that all of these subject properties are encumbered by what are called certificates of notice of installment payment of assessment of benefits. And that is, we call them 7-253 notices because that's the operative statute, which provides for payment plans that, the assessment of $7,500 can be paid off over the course of 20 years, which I think is generally speaking the plans that were implemented. The baseline statute, if you will, for assessment of benefits, though, is 7-249. And typically, I've seen assessments levied where it is just a lump sum payment that is due once it's levied. Here, the MPU was customer friendly in the sense that they allowed for these installment payment plans to be implemented. And all I can surmise, and maybe Attorney Driscoll may want to opine on this too, is that if properties here changed hands, the banks may have been willing to essentially clear title, even though there was that payment plan still in effect, with the thinking that maybe the new owner would be willing to just pay it off over time. Maybe it could be renegotiated. Whereas if, the 7-249 assessment were on the land records and there was no payment plan under 7-253, then most banks or closing attorneys would require, in order for title to clear, that be paid off in full. Here, I think that didn't happen for at least some properties, assuming that some of these properties did change hands during that 20-year period.
Bill, one of the things that could happen when a bank gives a mortgage, they usually want title insurance.
Right.
So it's not just the bank is willing to extend it, the title insurance company,
Right.
which really is not interested in doing that. If it were a cash deal,
Yeah.
Right.
you can make whatever arrangements you want and take the property subject to any and all claims.
Right.
But most, so.
Yeah.
So
Just to give you all a little bit of background, I misquoted by 10 years when I talked with Joe earlier. The city did a lot of projects out in the East Great Plains area. It resulted in 20 suits, which were consolidated into 3 main suits and tried in the complex litigation court under a title of Bertelsen versus Norwich. the judge basically acknowledged that these were benefits assessments properly assessed. He found that the sewer connection fees that we used were fair and reasonable under the circumstances. But based on all of the evidence, he concluded that no single residence had a benefit greater than $5,600. So that was the figure that he used. As above that, it had to be reduced. Below that, it was fine. The great majority of the properties were under that. There were a couple that were over. But one case involved 54 plaintiffs and 34 residents. One case involved 28 plaintiffs and 17 residents. And the third case involved 29 plaintiffs and 18 residents. So it covered a great number of properties out there. Now, those people that didn't participate in the lawsuit got whatever benefit the lawsuit brought for them. And again, they wouldn't have paid anything on that. So in all of this, it basically comes down to a determination of what the real benefit to each of the properties is based on a statistical analysis if you want. So I'll let Joe go from here.
And thank you for that, Mike. That's very useful for getting me up to speed, and certainly I think it informs everybody here. But at the end of the day, as Steve alluded to, the statutes do require that a certain process be followed. And I certainly understand and appreciate Commissioner Goldblatt's comments made earlier this evening. And I think there are ways, legally speaking, where interest can be waived. However, the default position, according to my reading of the statutes, is that interest shall be collected at 18% per annum. And that's by virtue of the property taxation statutes, which are incorporated into the Chapter 103 statutes, which govern this collection process. And it essentially requires General Statutes 12-146 that delinquent tax payments, or in our case, delinquent sewer benefit assessment payments, shall accrue interest at a rate of 1.5% per month or 18% per year. And the interest can only be waived under certain circumstances, which is why I think if those circumstances are satisfied, potentially the MPU might be able to waive interest. Of course, I think, and this is part of what we're really kicking around and finalizing the roadmap, is the fact that, as I'm sure everybody can appreciate, all customers need to be treated equally to the extent that they're similarly situated. And so if interest is waived for one group of customers, I think that the plan needs to somehow make that apply across the board in as fair, a means as possible. And so that's really what we're trying to finalize at this juncture.
And Bill and everyone, what Joe's also identified was if we are past the 20-year repayment period, we do have the ability to reassess them essentially for another 10 years, up to 30 years. So that will give those property owners that maybe inherited the property, they didn't know this was due, it gives them an opportunity to maybe pay this off over time rather than have to pay in one lump sum.
Yeah, and Steve, if I could just elaborate on that, I was going to touch on that, and thank you for the segue. But the operative statute 7253 used to only provide for 20-year installment payments. It was subsequently amended to allow for 30-year installment, payment periods. So as long as the payment plan is assuming that it is a 20-year payment plan, and assuming that the construction or expansion of the sewer systems were financed by GO bonds, the last installment can be made due up to 10 years after the last maturity date of the bonds. So as long as that deadline has not occurred yet, and it is, another 10 years out, that 20-year payment period can be extended to 30, and that would be a negotiation tactic by which NPU might be able to work with customers who can't pay up front. They can't pay the outstanding balance, but they nevertheless have indicated a willingness to cooperate.
I have a question.
So this is Stu Peel again. Just out of ignorance, did I hear that the assessment, the typical assessment is $7,500?
According to my review, that seems to be what the initial principle was. And Steve, please correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, it varies, Stu,
Okay.
depending on the project, depending on a number of things. In some cases, the city council voted to maybe fund a portion of a project, for instance.
Okay, but what's in the last 20 years, what's the largest sewer assessment that's been levied against an individual?
Laura, do you know that? It's probably under 10,000. Laura, do you know?
I have the exact number, but I can look that up. I think it's actually just slightly north of 10,000, but let me
Just north of 10?
Just
I think for a number of projects, Stu, they tried to keep it around 7,500 if
Okay,
at
so
all
let's
possible.
right. So let's just say $10,000, 20 years. That's $500 a year. And do they get billed yearly or monthly?
Well, it's that was the thing is we gave them a variety of ways to pay: monthly, annually, semi-annually, quarterly,
Okay.
and we allowed them to change the terms throughout the process.
Yeah, so that would work out to about $50 a month. And, I understand people, get into budgetary problems. I certainly lived month to month for many years of my life, but $50 a month would be my smallest bill, pretty much. So,
Really, if you think about it, this is Bill Wazika. I mean, even at $7,500 or 10 grand, I mean, you couldn't repair an on-site septic system for that price now. I mean,
No.
that's a real savings, and it's the sewer line is permanent and it adds to the value of the property. So I mean, people shouldn't be complaining really. But one question I had is, and I mentioned this before, Steve. Would it be more appropriate maybe to have the tax assessor's office try to going forward to be the main collector of these fees?
That's that's a good point, Bill, and that's going to be part of this plan is if that any potential to do that. Absolutely, because if I, Joe might correct me if I'm wrong, but they're the legal entity that has the ability to, I think, foreclose. I don't even know that we do.
And in the past, they've wanted us to take this role on,
Yeah.
but it's not like we want to be in this business. We did it because we had the ability to do it.
Yeah, we already are sending bills out to customers,
Right.
so
Yes,
this is 30 years, going on 30 years now.
Yeah, I agree with Steve.
And I'll just add to that. There are other means by which, foreclosure is just one option. You can also commence a collection lawsuit against the property owner. You can also assign the liens to a collection agency for consideration, and that agency can then pursue collection, and attorney's fees and costs can be awarded. And then also there are other means such as tax sales, whereby there's a sale of a non-judicial sale of the property. But again, in my analysis, we were operating under the understanding that NPU would like to try to work with customers instead of just go to DEFCON 4 and pursue foreclosure right off the bat. But certainly, that's the board's prerogative to make that decision.
I have a question, Joe, if I may. It's Mike Goldblatt.
Yes.
How can you work with customers if you have to charge them?
So,
Like state law.
I think you at the end of the day, the principal needs to be charged, and where you can work with customers is the ability to waive interest and or extend their payment periods. And
Can
if
we
all
come
else,
up with a
sorry,
can we come up with a lower interest rate? I mean, why start at 18% when you just murder? Can you just put into place 6% and have it for everybody? I mean, maybe not 6, but whatever the number is, feels good. Just throwing 6% out as a hypothetical. Can you do that?
So I think there would be the ability to do something like that with the caveat that the 18% would need to be officially waived. And one of the main means by which NPU could do that is under 12-145, which is a property taxation statute. That is one of the statutes which allows for the waiver of accrued interest on delinquent property taxes, but it has to, it's only put into effect if the tax collector and assessor jointly determine that the delinquency is the result of an error by either official and not the result of any action or omission by the taxpayer. The real legal issue here is whether NPU can be considered the tax collector in this instance. And I think, and again, this is subject to further review and finalization in our roadmap document, there would have to be cooperation with the city in that regard, obviously. They would have to essentially acknowledge that the delinquency or the amount of the delinquency it's gotten to this point is not necessarily the fault of the customers or the property owners. It was just the result of a collection error or something to that effect. Now, there are also other means by which you can evade taxes, and that could be maybe where. Sorry?
Why are they delinquent as an installment? If you have an installment plan, I mean, by definition, is that delinquent? Why are you saying delinquent?
If they have not been, because the installment payment plans required that an annual payment be made, and the example that I looked at was $375 per year. And if they're not making those payments in timely fashion, the statutes require that interest accrue for each one of those installment payments.
So what if there's an installment agreement in place and they have to pay $500 at the end of the year? Do they still have to pay interest installment payments in place? And they pay the $500, $375, or whatever it requires?
Yes. They would have to pay interest to wipe out that accrued debt.
They'd have to pay I don't understand it. I mean, if you have an installment plan, why are you doing it? Doesn't make any sense.
It only becomes delinquent if they don't pay, like in a year. So within that year, they're being charged the interest, whatever the bond interest is. And if they continue to make their payments, it just accrues at the bond interest, which is, percent or somewhere in that neighborhood.
I thought the attorney said we had to charge them 18% if they're on an installment plan. Is that right?
No, any delinquent amounts get charged 18%. So if you don't pay, like a credit card, it's going to be 18%.
The statute,
how much do we charge?
Mike, the statute reads, any assessment of benefits or any installment thereof not paid within 30 days after the due date shall be delinquent. then once it's in that category of delinquency, it becomes subject to the interest.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay,
it's,
so that's not so.
and I'll just go
So-
on further. It says shall be subject to interest from such due date at the interest rate and in the manner provided by the general statutes for delinquent property taxes. And that statute that I referenced previously, 12-146, requires 18% per annum. So that's
On what
that's
amount?
how we get there.
On what amount? On what amount is the 18% limit? What amount?
It
Whole
it's
balance or just the payment?
according to this statute, any assessment of benefits or any installment thereof. So I read that to be both of them.
So even if you miss a payment, the interest rate defaults to 18% on the entire assessment?
That's
Is that
my
what-
understanding.
Because usually, like in commercial law, if you miss a payment, you pay a penalty, for based on the payment, not based on the full amount of the debt. I suppose you could if it was in the contract. But, okay. So the 18% will go until you cured the late payment. So if you made the late payment and the accrued interest, would it revert back to the old interest rate of whatever the bond rate is?
Yes.
Okay.
And so these are all, I think, manners in which NPU can negotiate with customers. And it obviously is going to be important in the initial communication that's sent out to customers to make sure that, that there's a willingness to work with them, but they need to pay something. If that, just to put that bluntly.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve, Bill Wazika. Hey, another quick question. Of the 321 properties, when was the last time they were contacted by either the city or NPU? Do you know?
They get billed every month,
Month.
at least every month. Yeah, it's every month, Bill.
And,
They
and
get a bill.
so they pay their other bills, the utility bills, but they don't pay that. They leave that out.
This is a separate this is a bill outside of your utility bill. It's on blue
Okay.
paper. It's in a blue
Okay.
envelope, if I remember correctly. It's yeah.
So they've been apprised. Okay.
Correct.
And going forward, you would recommend that they again be individually, contacted by mail.
Yeah.
As to what's going to proceed with the path forward then.
Once we know the situation as to whether they were properly assessed and everything, and then we'll move forward with a notification or communication.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens, after that. I'm sure we're gonna have people that want to pay, or people that have been paying, people that want to pay, maybe people pay that have some kind of hardship that can't.
Yep.
And then people that maybe didn't want the project up front and will say, I'm not paying. So we'll have to deal with each one, separately when we get to that point, in the best way that we can. I'd say.
Joe, does this happen in other municipalities that you've worked in?
I could say that there are definitely collection issues that come up, and delinquencies are the reason why we stay busy.
Okay. I figured as much.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? I'm sure this won't be the last that you hear about this. And we really want to give everyone a summary because we've been putting a lot of effort into this. I know it seems like bad time in the middle of COVID, but we use that time to actually do a lot of homework here. And it's because of what's coming in the near future, and that's the, all of these retirements that are, or expirations that are coming up over the next several years, and having to deal with them.
May I ask a question if it's not pertaining to the assessment stats? This is Paula Licitra. Chris, just to let you know, when I send an email to Chris LaRose, it comes back undeliverable to John Bilda, B-I-L-D-A. just so you might want to talk to IT about that. And secondly, I wanted to thank the board member, I believe maybe it was Mr. Peel, suggesting that NPU look into their commercial billing process. And thirdly, I just had a question. Did the board have a conversation or a discussion about foreclosing on my 68 units with Lloyd Langhammer that caused me the $16,000 in legal bills? Was there a meeting about that?
Well,
Chris.
I'm not going to
Well, Chris
confirm.
Riley, I was asking, or either Chris Riley or Chris LaRose, I thought would be the two that would know the answer.
Well, I'm chairman of the Board of Commissioners, so
Oh,
I get the answer too.
sure.
And the answer is we don't discuss legal matters at public meetings, and that's neither to confirm nor deny your question.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions on sewer assessments?
Thank you, Joe and Mike.
Yeah,
Thank you
this
all.
is-
Thank
Okay,
you all. Good night.
yeah.
All right.
thank you, Joe. Thank you,
Thanks.
Mike.
All right, great. The
Take care.
next item on the agenda is for us to go into executive session to discuss a number of things, specifically discuss confidential trade secret and commercially valuable confidential or proprietary information not subject to inspection or public disclosure pursuant to section 12105 and 7232A of the Connecticut General Statutes. This information is commercially valuable, confidential, and proprietary, and is not for public disclosure pursuant to Public Act 98-212. It's also personnel matters and of an employee or employees and or public official pursuant to Chapter 14, Section 1206A of the Connecticut General Statutes. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make that
So
motion,
moved,
Bob.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I hear Bill and Steve. And
Yes.
so that we do have the motion and the second. Do we have a vote? If all those in favor of going into executive session signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? There are none. We are in executive session. That will require us to get off of this call and log on to the executive session website or Zoom connection. And then subsequently, we are going to have to come back into public session after the executive session. And that will, not only do we have to do that, that will require us reconnecting to the public session Zoom call. Oh, we're missing Mike?
Missing Mike, yep.
But we have a quorum.
Well, let's give him a minute.
Okay.
All right, hi, Mike.
Okay, Mike's here.
Good, good. All right, so the first item is the United Steelworkers contract. Chris? You
Yep.
wanna-
So we have a tentative agreement for a 1-year extension with a 2.25% wage increase, and it becomes effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022. So we'll
All right,
need
do
a
we have a
motion.
motion?
We'll need a motion to approve that.
Do we have a motion to approve in a second?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Mike seconds it.
Thank you, Mike. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, it passes. The second item is the AFSCME contract. And again, Chris?
It's another 1-year extension with a 2.25% wage increase. Becomes effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022.
All right, do we have a motion to accept and a second?
I'll make a motion to accept it. It's Mike.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. And the third item is the general manager. And for purposes of the general manager, we have a proposal to provide him with a 2% salary increase, $5,000 bonus, retroactive to January 1st, 2021. Do we have a motion? And
I'll
a
make
second?
that motion, Bob.
Thank you, Bill. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. It's Mike.
Thank you, Mike. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All- Anyone opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? All right, and again, it passes unanimously. Congratulations, Chris. You've done a great job.
Thank you very much, Bob.
And we are ready to do a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Stu Peel.
Thank you, Stu. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, it's unanimous again. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all very
Good night,
much.
everyone. Thank you.
Hey, Bob,
Good night.
before you go, I'm sorry.
Good night, everyone.
Wait, did the job description, was that, did you,
No, we did not vote on that, Michelle.
okay, sorry, I didn't want to hold that up another month. Okay,
And Bob, we did a news release on Chris's evaluation based on the email that you sent to Chris a week and a half ago. If I send you that tomorrow morning, could you just take a quick peek because it attributes some of it to you?
Sure, not a problem.
Good. I'll do that in the morning.
All right.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you.